strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. Today is April 30th, last day of the month. We're going to announce the winner of the Be Strong BFR system at the end of today's show. We have a winner. We had so many people sign up for that $429 blood flow restriction training system, and we have a winner, and he will be announced at the end of today's show. We have a great show planned for you today, a guy that I have a lot of respect for, and I got to tell you, this is a book that everybody should read, and it's easy to read because he writes in such an interesting way. He tells such a great story that it makes it very, very easy to become engaged and not want to put the book down. Of course, before we do any of that, we have to acknowledge the generous contribution to this show that Legendary Foods gives us month in and month out, keeps the show going. If you go to eatlegendary.com and use the code SHR10, you'll save 10% off all orders, including the tasty pastry. If you remember, for a long time, we did not include the tasty pastry in the discount because they couldn't keep them in stock. And if you have one, you'll find out why, because it is the Pop-Tart 2.0 with less than 1 gram of sugar and 9 grams of protein. But don't forget about their nut butters and their seasoned almonds. I'm telling you, Elisa can't even keep them near me. I eat them by the big bag now, and they're so delicious. And I'm not a guy who likes almonds as a rule. But let's go ahead and bring my guest on. Let's get him here. Drop some of these images out of the way. I met James Nestor at a Quest think tank, if you will, where many of us arrived to talk about all of all things, breath, breathing, carbon dioxide. I learned so much. I learned so much from James. He was actually researching for the book at that time, I believe. Right, James?
That's right. Yep.
So I got to ask you, your previous book was on deep sea divers, right? And
it was on free diving and the human connection to the ocean.
And did that pique your interest in the process of breathing? Because these guys go into the water for how long do they hold their breath for?
The longest breath hold on record is 12 and a half minutes. So,
and don't we say, like, if you hold if you have no oxygen or you're not breathing for 3 minutes, you're brain dead. These guys are coming up and they're fine, right?
Yeah, unless you condition your body to handle those states of hypoxia. And these people are just fine because they spend years and years conditioning their body. So no one should go in their bathtub and try to break this record right now. Bad idea. It takes years. So when I was out reporting for an article for Outside, I met these freedivers who were able to hold their breath for minutes at a time and dive down 300, 400 feet. No fins, no anything, just with their natural bodies. So this completely blew my mind. And I saw what learning how to breathe and holding your breath did for humans underwater, but I wondered what the applications were for the rest of us, for people who didn't want to dive that deep for that long. So what
were the most noticeable things that these guys that you observed in these divers?
Well, they told me the only way to hold your breath for 12 minutes or even for 4 minutes or even 2 minutes is to learn how to breathe. So learning how to breathe is the keystone to free diving. So they all had these enormous chests, these enormous lungs. It didn't matter if they were short or tall or fat or skinny or whatever. They all had enormous lungs. And they mentioned to me that breathing in these ways also benefits the body for physical endurance. It helps heal diseases. It enhances and allows you to live longer and healthier, on and on. This whole laundry list of what seemed to me like crazy claims. But the more I researched it over the years, the more I realized they were 100% right.
So, and I would have to imagine that because of modernity, we have a real challenge when it comes to breathing. I want to put the book up real fast for people who are interested in reading this book. I got to tell you, James, I get a lot of books I get a lot of books, as you can imagine, and people who, you know, coming on the show, they send me books, and most of them I just kind of glean. But first of all, as a writer goes, you tell an amazing story. You also have the most amazing ability to notice little things that when you weave them into the story. I mean, the only person I can recall that has your writing style, and maybe I'm wrong, and I hope you take this as a compliment and not an insult, but is Dashiell Hammett. Dashiell Hammett was amazing. What?
It's an amazing compliment. No, thanks.
Dashiell, I am a huge fan of Dashiell Hammett, and I can tell you that he writes and he observes the smallest little intricacies and details that when he weaves it into the story, you feel like you can visualize, you can feel like you're actually there, and that's how you write. You're brilliant.
Oh, thank you. What a wonderful compliment. Really appreciate that. You know, what I've found is most of the stories and most of the interesting stuff isn't where you would think to look. It's always in the cracks, which is why this book took me so long. I had written a proposal. That's how nonfiction works. You write a proposal, sell the proposal. They give you a little bit of cash to go out and write it. So I wrote this whole proposal 3 years ago, thought I had this whole subject figured out. I said, this book's going to be easy. And it wasn't until 6-7 months after I started writing the book that I realized I was completely wrong, that my path was completely wrong, and everything that I thought was most interesting about breathing and how we've lost this ability to breathe was several layers deep in this story. So, you know, as a journalist, that's just what you learn to do, is to dig and try to find those little cracks, and then to go in deeper and try to find a story that's no one's heard before.
So does that make humans the worst breathers in the animal kingdom? Is that us?
That's one of the many reasons, all that anxiety, realizing you've done something wrong. So a lot of it is due to changes in the human head, skeletal changes that have occurred. This started around, 1.5 million years ago when we first started processing food. What I mean by that is when we first started taking meat, bashing it up against rocks or tenderizing it with rocks. So that allowed us to spend a lot less time chewing, which gave us a lot more energy, which we used to grow a much bigger brain. So our brain was doubling in size. But once we started cooking with fire and learning how to process food that way, that released even more energy. The brain got so big that it needed somewhere to go. It didn't go to the back of our heads. Instead, it took space from the front of our faces. So our mouth shrunk, our sinuses shrunk, everything started shrinking. And so we can blame evolution for part of your sinusitis and asthma problems.
Yeah, I know. We are ill-equipped. When you look at other animals on the planet, our nose and this whole, it's actually not designed very well at all. So.
No, it's not. We had a nose that was like this for millions of years. All of our ancestors did, and it was much more efficient at keeping pathogens out and allowing us to breathe through. And so slowly our nose developed this way, our nostrils facing down, much less efficient. I mean, it didn't hurt us that much. Humans took over the world. We get that. But nonetheless, if you look at the jaws of our ancestors, all of the species that came before Homo sapiens, they had these enormous jaws and all their teeth fit in their mouths. And you think about it now, humans are the only species on the planet, perhaps the only species in the history of life on Earth, that have mouths so small that our teeth no longer fit. They're growing crooked. So what happens when you got a mouth that's too small for teeth? Also means you have a mouth that is a very small airway. That's one of the reasons we have so many of these respiratory problems right now.
In fact, there are dentists, very forward-leaning dentists now, that are doing palate expansions for people who, especially young children. You have a young, like if you're, okay, so here's an interesting correlation. If your child snores, I'm talking about a child, 8, 9, 10 years old, yep, they're more likely to have ADHD. If your child snores, they're more likely to have a very, very narrow jaw that causes sleep apnea. And the only way to solve that is to literally take the young palate of the mouth and put these braces in that literally start to pull it apart. Like the way braces make teeth straight, they open the palate up wider and make the jaw wider. And all of a sudden, these children can breathe again and they don't snore anymore.
So the first orthodontics were actually designed to do this, was to increase the playing field in your mouth. Because if your mouth's big enough, teeth are going to grow in, and they're going to grow in straight. If they have the room to grow in straight. If it's too small, what do? You have to pull teeth out. You have to crane teeth back. So I think that the orthodontics that I grew up with, I had braces, headgear, all that crap. I think in 10 years, 20 years, no one's going to be using that. If you think logically about it, spatially about this, it doesn't make any sense. And you're also, what happens when you, guess what happens? What else happens? So to solve the problem of having a mouth that's too small, we started taking out teeth and then getting headgear and pushing the mouth back. Guess what happens with that? The airway's even smaller. So there's very clear correlations between braces, the amount of extractions you've had, and sleep apnea and snoring. And there's, as you had mentioned, several dentists, and it seems like that's really, really growing the last couple of years, that are now using these functional orthodontics, which spreads open your palate, which I actually did to just see if it would work.
So, and another thing that we learned when we were at that group, which that was phenomenal, what Ron Penna had done to get people in the same room who had nothing in common other than the desire to learn and contribute. And we sat and listened to those two dentists who showed that, we've lost the ability to chew foods. Everybody eats foods that are soft now. It's changed the way the face actually is structured. And you can change it back by chewing stuff that's hard to chew.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's the silver lining to this. There's all this depressing information. Okay, we can blame evolution. Okay, we can blame our lifestyles. We can blame pollution, all that. But the good news is there's one bone in the body that can be developed at any age. And it's right here. It's the maxilla. It's your face. And so to prove this, and a lot of people don't acknowledge this right now, even people who have studied this, people in medicine say bones stop growing at 30. That's it. Or, late 20s. So to prove this, I worked with Ted Belfour and Scott Simonetti, and they put one of these devices in my mouth that I wore every night. Wasn't the most comfortable thing, that actually expanded my palate. And by doing that, it allowed me to have the chewing stress that I would not have had if I was eating the regular foods that I was eating. So this thing was designed so every time I shut my mouth, it induced this chewing stress. And I grew a ton of bone in my face. My airway got toned. My breathing vastly improved. So the news, here is that there's really no excuse. Anyone can do this at any age, and the devices are out there and the science is out there to prove it.
I think when I met you, you told me the story about Native Americans would teach their children not to breathe through their mouth by holding their noses when they were very young. They held their nose in their mouth, but then how did they do that? Tell me that story.
Yeah, again, don't try this at home with your own kid. So there was this guy, George Catlin, in the 1830s. He was a painter in Philadelphia, got bored with the pomp of that lifestyle. So he grabbed a gun, some canvases, some brushes, and went out to the Great Plains and traveled more miles than Lewis and Clark. Along the way, he lived with 50 Native American tribes before these people were even contacted. So way before they were introduced to guns or alcohol or Western foods. He found that they all shared the same exact breathing habits. They always breathed from their noses all the time. They felt that breathing this way could prevent illness and could also help form a very handsome face. That was his term, not mine. It's no coincidence that he said every single one of these people that he lived with had perfectly straight teeth. So for their kids, nasal breathing started really early. So whenever the kid was asleep, whenever the mouth would open slightly, a mother would come over and slightly shut it. Whenever the kid was done breastfeeding, they would shut the mouth. So some tribes even went to so far as to place children on this plank to have them sleep so that their heads were positioned in a certain way so that their mouths would stay shut and they would only nasal breathe. And this was shared, according to Catlin, throughout every tribe in the U.S. and even down in South America. He went down there for several years.
Now, there's science that shows, well, first of all, when we look at the animal kingdom, there are very few. I mean, unless a tiger is panting and it's trying to get off heat. I mean, animals all breathe through their noses, right?
Absolutely. You know, a dog, you're going to see a dog, but that's just doing it, just as you said, to release heat. You know, it's thermoregulating. But imagine a horse. A lot of runners have asked me this too. They're like, I can't breathe through my nose. I breathe through my mouth. There's no way I can get enough air to saturate all my tissues and muscles. Completely fictitious.
Baloney. Yeah.
Look at a horse. Look at a horse racing. If you see a horse with its mouth open, that animal's sick or it's about to die. And that goes for, you can imagine, any other animal. There's some breeds of dogs, brachycephalic dogs like pugs and bulldogs. They've been bred in a way that their faces are so flat that sometimes they have to open their mouth and they're constantly sneezing. They constantly have sinus issues.
And they have really, really short lifespans.
It's very short life.
Both pugs and bulldogs, they have the shortest lifespans of just about any dog breed.
Yeah, they can't breathe. They're struggling to breathe the whole time. And, you know, it's so similar to what's happened to humans. I mean, we become that type of dog. We are the brachycephalic version of our species, which is sad. But it is good news that we can change this.
But there is science now. So one of the things that you and I spoke about was the whole turbination effect of breathing through the nose, plus the importance of nitric oxide as a signaling molecule. And talk about that.
Yeah, there's so many benefits to breathing through the nose. So when we breathe through the nose, we filter air, we add humidity to this air, we heat it up, we condition it before it goes into the lungs. So this is our first line of defense against pathogens, bacteria, viruses, you name it, is the nose. So also in the nose is all these paranasal sinuses, which produce something called nitric oxide. I'm sure your listeners know all about NO, but just a little refresher, which plays an essential role in circulation. It plays an essential role in fighting viruses, bacteria, other pathogens. And some people think that we actually survive on a 3-gas system: CO2, O2, and nitric oxide. That's how important it is. And when we breathe through the nose, we get about a 6-fold increase of nitric oxide. So it's interesting to note that Viagra works by enabling us to use more nitric oxide to open up all our capillaries, you know where, and elsewhere. That's how it works. So you can get natural Viagra breathing through your nose. And if you hum, you're going to increase that NO by 15 times the amount you would otherwise. So you're going to annoy everyone around you, but screw them. Do it anyway.
Yeah, right. Tell them, hey, I'm making Viagra right now. Leave me alone. And then the other thing is that it was discovered that there are nerve bundles that go right from the nose to the cerebral cortex. And so all of us who remembered non-computer driven cars and just a naturally aspirating car, when we moved to the computerized cars, they all had an O2 sensor that helped to regulate the leanness or the richness of your fuel. We actually have that in our face, don't we?
For sure. And those noses tell us when we're breathing and register how we're breathing. So people who have had their turbinates drilled out in surgeries by overzealous ENTs lose this ability. So they don't know when they're breathing and when they're exhaling. So they're constantly going. It's an awful condition called empty nose syndrome. And it just shows that there's this gap of understanding where the nose is such a vital organ, but still some surgeons will go in and take out so much of this very intricate organ here, and it really messes people up. So this is not a warning against getting nasal surgery. Just do it smart, and a less is more approach is really the way to go.
Well, it dictates you have a conversation with your surgeon that explains to them that you understand this, and you ask them about their own policy and procedures in this, and you say, hey, I don't want to end up with empty nose syndrome, and they'll go to you, who have you been talking to? You know? Yeah. Have you been talking to James Nestor?
Well, again, I've seen people completely transformed by responsible nasal surgeries, deviated septum, completely transformed. You know, the important thing is more is not more when it comes to breathing. Most oftentimes, less is more. By breathing less, we can actually absorb more oxygen. We can go further. We can run further. We can have more endurance. So that's something that seems to be completely lost both in the medical community and elsewhere.
Well, it's estimated that we breathe anywhere from 17,000 to 30,000 times a day. And this is primarily driven by the autonomic nervous system. So we're not paying attention. We're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you start paying attention to your breathing, you'll notice things. You'll notice that you're breathing more shallow when you are upset. I told you the story. I was on the phone, and Anders Olsen, who is a brilliant guy, who is a Buteyko breathing guy, very, very important. He put a lot of emphasis on the importance of carbon dioxide. It's not a waste gas. It's a very important gas. And we were at that group, and he was watching me breathe. I didn't know that. And he said to me, what's going on with you? He says, I noticed all of a sudden your breathing has changed. And I said, I just had a distressing phone call. He goes, yeah, you're breathing much more shallow. He goes to me, come on, breathe. And I started to breathe with him, and the stress of the phone call literally just went away. I didn't even have to think about it. I just had to change my breathing.
Sure. Well, breathing is one function. We can't control how we digest food. We can't control our heart rate. We can't control all these other functions in our body, but we can control how and when to breathe. And when we control that, we can influence how everything else works. So if you think about an animal that's stressed or a person that's stressed, they're jacked up, sympathetic overdrive, they're ready to roll. But if you calm your breathing, you're going to slow your heart rate. You're going to shift your nervous system into a parasympathetic state. So you can take control of your own body and how it reacts. You can trigger hormones. You can trigger different moods, different thoughts, when to digest, when not to, on and on and on, by simply controlling your breathing. It's that powerful of a tool. And in my opinion, it's been completely overlooked. People talk about exercise. We know you need to exercise to be fit and to be healthy and live a long life. We know you need to eat well. But I believe that breathing needs to be included in that, along with those two other, aspects of health. And from what I've found, very few people are talking about it, and fewer really understand how it works.
We don't even think about it any more than we think about our heart beating. Patrick Rogers says he was a mouth breather his whole life until 2 years ago due to structural, probably he had some sort of deviated septum or something. Yeah. Feel better and constantly retraining myself to nose breathe. So that is another thing. You have to pay attention in order to train yourself, right?
For sure. But the more you train yourself, the more you create that habit consciously, the more you're going to be breathing that way unconsciously. And that's the real key. No one wants, reminders on your phone to go off every 15 minutes to breathe slowly and to pay attention to your breathing. But it's just like anything else. You condition yourself, and then your body is going to adjust to that and understand how helpful and healthful that is to you. And so you're going to naturally want to do it. And I think that, it starts with that. At the beginning, it's not easy, especially for people who've been mouth breathing at night, mouth breathing during the day. They're like, how am I supposed to, do that at night? How am I supposed to breathe through my nose? There's many ways. None are really that comfortable. But once you get over that hump, everything gets a lot easier.
So I got to put this up. Ivo Su, who listens to this show from across the world, he's a great guy. He says, I tape my mouth every night to make sure I nose breathe while asleep. That's one of the things I learned and I started doing. And the quality of my sleep changed literally in one night's sleep.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So we did a study at Stanford, more of an experiment than a study, in which Anders and I obstructed our noses for 10 days, recorded every imaginable metric from PFTs. We had CGMs on, we did nitric oxide, CO2, oxygen, everything. And just to see how simply shifting the pathway from breathing from our noses to our mouths would affect us. And just in regards to sleep, the first night that I obstructed my nose, my snoring went up 1,200%. So I went from snoring about 2 minutes to snoring a few hours. Within a few days, I was snoring through half the night. I never snored for the past several years. And the day we took all that off and used mouth tape, the snoring completely disappeared. 30-fold drop right out of the gate. So it just shows you that this is something anyone can do. I do not recommend placing a huge strip of duct tape across your mouth. bad idea. Don't look at YouTube. There's a bunch of bad advice on there. But all you need is a teeny piece of tape. Like imagine like a Charlie Chaplin mustache. Move it down an inch so it's covering your lips. Even if the sides of your lips are open, that's fine. You're just training yourself to keep your jaw shut. And this has been completely transformative for me as well. Once I discovered this, I'm like, why didn't somebody tell me this 20 years ago?
Nobody pays attention to breathing. We just assume that the fact that we're breathing, we're doing it right. So I have to ask you this question because I have to find it now. There has to be some changes going on right now because of all the stress due to this pandemic. What do you think? I mean, people probably aren't paying attention to their breathing. A lot of people are stressed out. A lot of people feel a great deal of anxiety. I get it. It's a troubling time, but I wonder how many people are shallow breathing now.
Oh, I think that far more than there were before, without a doubt. I don't have any numbers on that, but I mean, just look at me. Here I am sitting in front of my computer, kind of hunched over. I'm not breathing that healthy. I should be breathing these full breaths. I should be breathing into my abdomen, should be filling up. I should be sitting like this, but I'm not, because when I'm focused on something, especially if I'm answering emails, doing this interview, I'm focused on talking to you. I'm not focused on my breathing. So you add anxiety to that and panic and stress to that, you've got a very bad combination. And those are known correlations between your mental state and how you're breathing. So people with chronic anxieties and panic breathe way too much, way into the chest. They have very low CO2 levels. This is all established stuff. So the one, recommendation I would give to people right now is try to be conscious of your breathing, breathe slow and breathe low. And you can really change your mind and mood by just doing that.
So this was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Dr. Daniel Lieberman came on my show a couple of times, and one of the things that he left me with was that the greatest driver of evolution is, I hear my voice coming back at me all of a sudden. The greatest driver of evolution is culture. And right now we're all obsessed with washboard abs. How is that affecting our breathing?
Well, I think you've got one set of people who are very interested in fitness and washboard abs. You have another set who are hunched over the computers looking at their phones the whole time. So neither is doing anything really right. So if you're hunched over your phone like this, I mean, just imagine what your diaphragm has to do in order to take a deep breath. It's got to do all this extra work. It's so much harder. So you just breathe into your chest. If you're talking about fitness people, especially be it yogis or whomever, everyone wants to have a really flat stomach, especially if you're showing that off at the beach. So you can't take these big abdominal breaths and have that washboard look. But I mean, I think your health, your overall health and longevity is more important. Is worth more than that. Maybe someone's taking a picture, you inhale it up, get the picture taken, but then go back to some healthy breathing. And you see the body types of people who really practice healthy breathing. Maybe their abs aren't as ripped, like absolutely as ripped as someone else. They still look great because they're calm. Their shoulders are relaxed. Their skin has a different tone to it. So if you're looking at aesthetics, I think the benefits of abdominal breathing far outweigh those of sucking in your stomach to look good.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking more about this fantastic book. I'll put the book back up and where you can get it. Stay tuned. You're listening to Superhuman Radio. Redcon One is one of the fastest growing supplement companies in the world today. That's because they produce supplements that deliver on their promises. From their flagship pre-workout Total War to their innovative whole food MREs and bars. Now you can get the deepest discount ever offered to any audience anywhere. Use code SHR and get 25% off all Redcon One products today. SHR and 25% off. Go to redcon1.com. That's REDCON, the number 1.com. Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor? Strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon. You've heard about blood flow restriction training since 2006 on SHR, but you're still on the fence. Well, here's the push. BFR is more effective at building muscle than anabolic steroids. That's right, I went there, but it's because it's the truth. My experience with the Be Strong blood flow restriction system is proof to me, and now I'm asking myself why I waited so long. You'll see undeniable changes in the targeted muscles in days and weeks like nothing you've ever tried before. I will never stop using them. Give Be Strong a try. Go to BStrong.training/super-human and use code SHR for 10% off. Imagine if you had a digital twin, one that you could compare your own health and fit comes to, one that showed you whether or not the things you're doing, food you're eating, or drinks you're drinking are actually working for you or against you. Well, now you can. The first ever advanced epigenetic saliva test that compares 20 million different data points of your DNA to help predict what is aging you faster or keeping you younger is being introduced to my audience at a 70% discount from the normal price. Go to seeds.md/epigenetic-test today to learn how to get your own digital twin that will help you take the steps to live longer and stay stronger. Don't wait, because this is a limited time offer not available anywhere else. Once these tests are gone, they're gone. Again, go to seeds.md/epigenetic-test today to learn more.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Ever wish there was a precise way to gauge your recovery from workout to workout? Or wonder if the money you're spending on your nootropic supplements are actually improving brain function? Maybe you're aging and you're noticing some changes in memory. Wouldn't being able to really test your brain be of great value? Well, now you can with great accuracy with the Brain Gauge. The Brain Gauge lets you test essential components of brain health and track your brain health history, and all in the comfort of your own home. Go to gaugeyourbrain.com and use code SHR for $150 off this amazing device. That's gaugeyourbrain.com and SHR for $150 off.
Spit that out right now. This is the Superhuman Channel.
For those of you listening to the podcast, I'm sorry, I should tell you the name of the book is called Breathe, and it is The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. You can go to Amazon.com to get it. If you want to learn more about James, you can go to MrJamesNestor.com. It's a great book. It's a must read. There are certain books that I really believe have the potential to change lives with very, very minimal alterations in behavior. And this is definitely one of them, because there's a lot of people out. So 2 things, observations. I just started thinking about breathing through my belly a little bit more, which they tell you, like in martial arts, you're supposed to breathe through your belly. That actually produces a stronger core than kind of rigiding up your stomach. And I have been very conscious of sitting straight. If you start to be conscious of breathing through your belly, your lumbar spine naturally arches out. And you don't have to think about your lumbar spine.
For sure. And Mike Mew, who's a dentist and a researcher who's been studying this stuff for years and years and years. He's the son of John Mew, who's been studying this stuff since the 50s. He believes, this is just a hypothesis, that having a posture in which your neck is out, your shoulders are forward, makes it really hard to get ripped abs, right? So if you have a proper posture where you're up like this, your stomach's naturally going to be extended. You're going to be engaging those muscles a lot more instead of engaging your back and your shoulders. If you look at indigenous people from Australia or South America, these people never did any sit-ups, right? They weren't doing pull-ups. They're all completely ripped, you know? And I think that some of that has to do with how they held their bodies up, their posture.
But clearly, like like Elise always tells me, sit up straight, because I'll kind of roll my shoulders forward. But and I have to think about, okay, pull your back, you know, curve. But when I just think about breathing through my stomach, all of that falls into place.
It's how your body is naturally designed to breathe, right? You don't see a dog breathing into its chest. Check out a dog's stomach next time it's after a run. You know, it's going to be going up and down. Same with a baby. Check out how a baby breathes.
Yes.
We lose this ability as we grow older, as we start living these sedentary lifestyles in which we're hunched over all the time. We're at school, we're at computers, but something to correct. I agree with you. When you're sitting down, be conscious. You want a J-shaped spine. You don't want an S-shaped spine. And, you know, try to get up, have a standing workstation's good. And more importantly, go outside more often, you know, if you can.
So give the audience the 4 tips that they can actually use right now to breathe better and feel better.
I think the number one is nasal breathing all the time, anytime. A lot of people are going to say, can't breathe out of my nose. It's messed up. The more you use it, the more it's going to open up. Okay. So that's very important to know. If you think about a sink in your kitchen, if your sink is clogged, you're going to find a way of clearing it as soon as possible. So you need to think of your nose in the same way. You want to breathe out of your nose, period. You want to breathe slowly. Okay. You don't want to breathe 20 times a minute. You want to breathe closer to maybe 12 times a minute. And if you're really focused, maybe shrink that down to 6 times a minute into the stomach. If you want a nice practice that's going to relax you. You need to breathe less. That doesn't go for everybody, but for the vast majority of us, breathing less will allow your body to get more oxygen, more energy. And the last one of these is, if you're really into this stuff, and I know a lot of your listeners are, and they don't have long-standing chronic conditions, there are many different breathwork practices like Wim Hof method, like Tumo, Sudarshan Kriya, on and on, that allow you to breathe very fast for short amounts of time. And by doing that, you're able to control your autonomic nervous system. You're able to turn it on into a stress state. And then more importantly, you're able to turn it off for the other 23 and a half hours of the day to chill out, which is where you need to be. So I'm a big fan of that conscious, very rigorous breathing. I've seen people absolutely transform, people with autoimmune diseases, with psoriasis, eczema, even type 1 diabetes, transformed by just allowing themselves to breathe and regaining control of their nervous systems, which has gone awry.
That's fascinating. You know, I observed the great apes, gorillas, and when they're relaxed, sitting, and someone is observing them from afar with a camera, one of the things I noticed about their breathing was upon the exhale, they didn't immediately breathe back in. It's almost like, and when you understand the connection between your breath and your heart, when you breathe in, your heart races up. When you breathe out, it slows down. And what I found out was when you breathe out and stay there for a count of a second or two before you inhale again, your heart just gets really relaxed. It just slows down. And I thought, wow, that's how the great apes breathe. They're not, as soon as they breathe out, breathing in, they breathe out. There's like no urgencies. It's not until their body demands that they breathe back in that they take another breath. And I thought that was fascinating because we don't breathe like that. We breathe like everything is an emergency, especially with push notification from your phone and text messages and 6 different emails. I mean, it's crazy today.
Yeah, the ancient Chinese prescribed 13,500 breaths a day. So, which is about half of what we're breathing right now. And, you know, so that's interesting. I don't know how they came to that specific number, but it's
I'd like another guy who counted all day long.
They had a lot of time, no computers, no phones, no TVs, you know, to study this stuff.
I can see a guy counting. He's up to like 7,000 and something. And somebody says, did you see those 2 geese that flew over? 2. Oh man, I got to start all over again.
Yeah, he's just got a jar of pebbles, just throwing one in every single time somebody breathes. However he did it, man, it says something right there. So if you think about low resting heart rates, you think about the fittest people, right? So their resting heart rate maybe in the high 40s and the 50s. So the only way to maintain a resting heart rate that low is to breathe slow. You cannot have a low resting heart rate and go impossible. So these people are such good athletes. Either they've trained themselves to breathe this way or they were naturally good breathers to begin with. And if you look at, every animal has a billion heartbeats in its lifetime. I think humans have 2 billion. We're the exception to the rule.
Mm-hmm.
And the fewer heartbeats you can take per day on average, at least this is how it works out, means you're going to be able to live a longer life. So we've got a ticker here. So you don't want to have this thing jacked up all day at 90. Yeah, you want to get it really high when you're working out for a half hour, for an hour. But then the benefits of exercising so rigorously is the heart rate's going to come back down. You're going to be in better shape. So it doesn't need to beat that hard during the rest of the time. So I think that, and this is what yogis say, you don't have a lifespan is not calculated in years. It's calculated in breaths, how many breaths you take. So the fewer breaths you take, the slower these breaths are, you're going to live longer, according to 1,000-year-old texts.
I'm glad that Derek just popped in. Derek Trombetta was with us at that group.
Oh, awesome.
So Derek was a fireman, and we were talking about carbon dioxide. I was actually going to ask this question next. Derek, you must be on the ESPN channel right now. And so Derek said, we learned as firefighters that it was more important to watch somebody's CO2 levels than their O2 levels as a predictor that there's no saving them. As long as their O2 levels stayed higher, they could still bring people back to life. And talk about the relationship of CO2 and O2 and how CO2 actually makes us more efficient at scavenging O2 out of the blood.
Mm-hmm. Well, the need to breathe is not determined by the amount of oxygen in your bloodstream. It's determined by the amount of CO2. That's what triggers the need to breathe in our chemoreceptors, central chemoreceptors. So these two molecules have a very symbiotic relationship. And this is another thing that I had a real hard time believing this until I heard it 4 million times by various people and did a bit of research in it. But what happens is oxygen is going to detach from hemoglobin much more easily in a state in which there is more CO2. So it's going to exchange much more easily. That's aerobic respiration. So you want to be running your cells aerobically, not anaerobically, not with fermentation. So by having CO2 has a massive effect on vasodilation. So it's going to open all those arteries up, those capillaries up, and allow for the transfer of oxygen much more easily into cells. And it's also oxygen as opposed to anaerobic respiration. You're going to gain around 16 times more energy from that than from burning anaerobically. So CO2, a lot of people just look at their O2, pulse oximeter, I've got one right here. They're just looking at their O2 the whole time. But I really think if you want to really gauge someone's health, you have to be looking at these gases together and the relationship between those, because you need healthy to high CO2 and healthy to high O2 to really get the most out of each breath.
And see, from a physiological standpoint, this makes perfect sense, because when O2 goes high in the blood, the body goes, okay, we need more oxygen. So it liberates more oxygen from the hemoglobin. So that's the limiting factor for how fast oxygen can then be released, is that the O2 level has to be there. If O2 is real low, the body goes, oh, we're cruising along. We don't need to release a lot of oxygen right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because, and they found this, discovered this 100 years ago. It's called the Bohr effect. And you can look that up. And this is how cells get there. More oxygen is going to go to a place where there is CO2. It is naturally attracted to where there's CO2, which is why if someone's got gangrene or some other skin problem, if you bathe that area in CO2 or even inject it, there's going to be so much more oxygen in circulation to that area, and it's massively effective. And, you know, scientists have been using CO2 for literally the past century. It was used for everything. It was never disclaimed. They used it for epilepsy. They used it for schizophrenia because it allowed them, they believe, to open up dormant areas in the brain to get these people to think normally. They even had it on fire trucks in New York and Chicago to help people who had just suffered from strokes, from heart attacks, from asphyxia, pneumonia, asthma. I could go on and on. And again, it was never disproven. But for some reason, another therapy came around, and we no longer use it. But from what I've seen and the researchers I've been working with, there's going to be this huge resurgence in research into CO2 because it's so cheap, it's so simple, and it works so well.
The book is called Breathe.
Breath.
The new science. Breath. I'm sorry.
Right.
Breath. There was no E at the end. I'm like Dan Quayle. Breath. I'm sorry.
So
that was a dirty trick.
Flash from way back. Well, I get it. I get the reference.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you.
Potato.
Yeah.
James Nestor's book is called Breath, The New Science of Lost Art. You can get it at Amazon.com or where better books are sold. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to wrap up this interview. I've got a couple more questions for James. And then later in the show, my friend Mark David John Evans, who is a brilliant statistician and works in the actuarial area of life, is going to put my theory to the test that the reason that we have hot spots for COVID-19 is because the combination of international travel hubs and the dependence on mass transit. And if I'm right, then we really just needed to close up New Jersey and New York and some parts of California and things like that, and not the whole country. Since he's a numbers guy, he's going to call my BS out if I'm really off on this one. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more James Nestor. Are you still on the fence about Body Protection Complex BPC Oral from drseeds.com? Listen to Maggie Kuhn, one of the owners of the C-Bus lifting company, Gym, in Columbus, Ohio.
I had been having some nagging tendon issues that weren't injuries, just things that were annoying. You know, I'm 58 years old, so just older tendon kind of issues. For us powerlifters, you know, we really don't stop training when we have just nagging issues. We just kind of keep pushing through. And I started the BPC. What I noticed was I was doing some heavy tricep stuff that would have killed me before when I had an elbow problem, and I was able to do those with literally no pain at all.
Go to drseeds.com, drseeds.com. Use coupon code SHR and save 20% off your bottle of BPC Body Protection Complex today.
Quest Nutrition makes bars, cookies, chips, and pizzas out of complete dairy-based proteins. Our products minimize net carbs and sugar without sacrificing taste. Each delicious chocolate-flavored chip, cookie chunk, and crunchy crumble is custom-made to maintain Quest macros. It's time to enjoy foods that work for you, not against you. It's time to enjoy your Quest.
Men and women, you've heard about hormone optimization. Do you feel like it's something you want to look into? RenewLifeRx.com is the place to start. Their doctors can help you with the solutions. RenewLifeRx.com has a simple process for lab work, consultation, and taking a deep dive into where your hormone levels can be improved. Superhuman Radio listeners get 30% off your initial lab work and consultation. Go to RenewLifeRx.com to schedule your no-obligation phone consultation today. Feel younger, get in better shape, and be more productive at RenewLifeRx.com.
Hey, this is Carl. For 14 years, you've heard me talk about Can-C eye drops, and they being the reason that I do not need reading glasses at now 61 years old. But I regularly get emails and messages from people who've been using Can-C and having some amazing results. Recently, I got an email from a fellow named Chad, who, because he was on dexamethasone eye drops for over 6 months, developed a cataract. Can-C eye drops actually reduced my cataract to the point where even my doctor has a hard time finding it. I will never stop using Can-C eye drops twice a day. I've been using them since 2008, he says. And you should be too. There is no better way to keep your eyes healthy and seeing clearly than Can-C eye drops. Go to wisechoicemedicine.com today and get on board, and we will both be looking into the future with very very clear vision. You've heard me talk about the chill pill on the show and how effective it is at helping people who suffer from social anxiety, or sometimes when you just want to take the edge off to a long, stressful day. Well, listen to this story from Dylan Goutreau.
Definitely takes anxiety away, which I have a long history of having. Started out at 2 milligrams a day of Xanax. That was at 8 years old. And so I stopped using benzos 3 years ago. Extremely difficult. Yeah, so I spent about 3 years trying to find anything and everything I could that would be healthy for me to help with anxiety. Because I'm talking, full out panic attack. The chill pill was the first thing that I found that actually, in the middle of a panic attack, I can take, and it definitely subsides.
Go to drseeds.com. That's DRSEEDS.com. Use coupon code SHR and save 20% off your first bottle of the chill pill. Check it out. I promise this is one supplement that delivers.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. Don't hate us because we feel good.
Welcome back. We're talking with author James Nestor. This is a great book. Like, as soon as you read the first few paragraphs, you go, wow. I thought this was going to be one of these technical, hard to read. I mean, it reads so easily. It's fantastic. You're a very, very talented writer. Okay, so you learned a lot from the exploratory process of writing this book. How has that changed? How has it changed your life? And how long did it take for you to start to change some of these things that you didn't want in your breathing process any longer?
Well, as a journalist, you set out to research subjects and try to present facts objectively, right? I had absolutely no inclination to be against mouth breathing or be pro nasal breathing or anything. I have no background in breathing or the science. I've never written a book that had so much medical research in it either, but you can't, as you keep hearing these things over and over and over again, either from ancient texts to scientists 100 years ago to scientists now, you can't help wanting to incorporate these things into your life to improve how you feel. So I tried out a lot of this stuff and I measured it to see what would happen. That's a small slice of the book. Most of it is focused on these researchers. And what I found is there's a ton of books about how to breathe right. And some of these things are thousands of years old or hundreds of years old. You can buy yogi books. All the instructions to proper breathing are in there. But unless you know the why and where this stuff came from, I found that they didn't do too much just to get the direction. So I really try to go in that direction and find out, why is breathing so important to longevity? How does it affect our muscles and tissues? How does it affect our mental states? And who are the researchers working on this? And what's the history? And one thing I kept finding is we've known about this stuff, humans have, for literally thousands of years. Since the early Hindus to the Chinese and the Tao, they wrote 7 books focused entirely on breathing, on how breathing poorly could make you sick and how breathing well could make you healthy. And for some reason, this has just been completely lost. And that's why I call it a lost art. But luckily, I think there's enough researchers in well-known institutions, Harvard, Stanford, and so on, who are pursuing this topic and finding so much of what we had learned so many hundreds of years ago is 100% right. I just want to say one thing about burning anaerobically, because I know a lot of your listeners are really into this.
Yeah,
really into this stuff. What I'm talking is unconscious time. I'm not talking about working out. The benefits of working muscles anaerobically are known. Okay, the benefits of CO2 training, how it can increase EPO and blood cell counts and increase VO2 max. All of that is known. I'm talking about the other 23 hours of the day. You don't want to be burning anaerobically. You want to be burning aerobically. So the very, very different thing. When someone's dying, they start burning, all their tissues start burning anaerobically. So I just wanted to clear that up because I know that, you guys know your stuff.
And we know from Dr. Thomas Seyfried that anaerobic respiration, mitochondrial anaerobic respiration is where cancer begins.
That's absolutely right. In areas of low oxygen, that's where it begins and that's where it grows very quickly. But when we consciously put ourselves, and this is something I kept finding in this book, just like we're not supposed to breathe too heavy, right? But when we consciously do that to ourselves, we regain the power and to control our bodies and to make ourselves more fit so that all that other time, sleeping hours, all the other resting hours, we're burning cleaner and we're able to do more with less. And I think that that's really the key. Conscious breathing, very different from unconscious breathing.
You know, it's funny. Two observations. I have to keep reminding myself to stop tensing my stomach and let it kind of fall out, so to speak, and breathe into my stomach. How long does it take, or how long did it take you to like change the way you were breathing before and after?
I'm still working on it. I'll be honest. You know, I've been working on this book a long time, and if I didn't have these practices, I probably wouldn't have ever finished this thing. I mean, it almost killed me. So I have a couple tweaks that I do. There's something called email apnea that up to 80% of the population suffers from. So when you sit down, you're focused. Oh, I got to get back to him. Oh, I got to, get on Twitter, do all this. Our breathing goes to hell. So they've measured this. A bunch of NIH studies have measured this. So what I do sometimes is I get my pulse ox and I put it on my wrist and I have it so it goes off at if I ever hit below 92 sats, O2 sats. And you would be amazed how often I do, how often anyone does when you're sitting there really focused on something. So that's one little tweak I do to help continually remind me. I do Wim Hof breathing at least once a week. I do Sudarshan Kriya at least once a week. I always sleep with tape on my mouth. I'm a real nerd with this stuff now. I got a little obsessive. My wife was getting a little freaked out, but she's learned to live with it. And slowly I've really noticed especially in the past year, I'm adopting these habits unconsciously through a lot of hard work. And man, what a difference it makes. Has
it made a difference to you?
Absolutely. And I have metrics to show it. That was the whole point of the Stanford experiment, is we know that healthy breathing is going to improve all of these functions in the body. We just don't know how quickly it occurs. And on the other hand, we know that poor breathing is really going to affect you on numerous levels. We don't know how quickly. It turns out it occurs in a couple of days. The soft tissues in the back of the mouth, like all this stuff happens very quickly, which means you can turn it around that quickly as well.
This rapid breathing as an exercise makes sense because some of the early meditation techniques I learned. In fact, I was living in Las Vegas in my 20s, and Ram Dass lives in Las Vegas. And I didn't know who he was. And I went to some local metaphysical shop and went to a meditation class. And it was Ram Dass. Now that I look back, I was like, holy crap. Two famous people I met, Ram Dass and Timothy Leary, who altered the way I think, really. But it's funny because one of the things he said was, if you can't get relaxed, tense your entire body and hold it as tense as you can until you can't hold it anymore, and then relax it. Sometimes like a pendulum, sometimes you have to find the extreme left in order to find the extreme right. So that makes perfect sense to me.
For sure, which is why I think that those very vigorous breathing techniques work so well. They completely jack you up so that you be able to chill out. And then in some before workout, you can start your respiration. You can start your breathing early. So that beginning first 10 minutes of the workout feels so much better because you're oxygenating everything. You're not, running anaerobically for the beginning. And that's something I also learned is breathe as though you would be breathing during a hard workout a few minutes before you even start. And that always helps me, at least.
The book is called Breathe. You can get it at, I'm sorry, I keep doing it. Thank you.
You're not the only one.
I keep trying to remind you. Have no idea how hard it is for me not to tense my stomach and breathe through my abdomen. I'm doing it like literally. All of a sudden, my mind is off the show, and I'm thinking about, oh no, I'm holding my breath again. I can't believe how often I hold my breath.
These are good habits, man. I mean, they're going to annoy you, but once you start doing them unconsciously, you're going to really feel the benefits of that, without a doubt.
The book is called Breath. It's at Amazon.com. And listen, just because you're breathing doesn't mean you're doing it right. Take it from me. I'm living proof. I'm living it right now in this moment. I'm going to have to work really, really hard to reteach myself how to breathe. James, thanks so much for being on the show today, man. And this book is great. This is, so many books are hard to read that I have to I got to read this. I started reading this book. I was like, this guy he's really good. It wasn't even about the information at that point in time.
Thank you very much, Carl. You know, you're one host who actually shows up, does his homework. So it's a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. You take care of yourself. We're going to take one quick commercial break. When we come back, my good friend is going to join me, Mark David John Evans, and he's going to put me in my place because there's a high probability that I'm wrong about what I've been saying, and that relates to this COVID spread and seeding. But he'll tell us. So stay tuned. We're going to take one quick commercial break. We'll be right back. And also, I'm going to announce the winner of the $429 Be Strong BFR bands. So that'll be on the other side of this break. Imagine if you had a digital twin, one that you could compare your own health and fitness outcomes to, one that showed you whether or not the things you're doing, food you're eating, or drinks you're drinking are actually working for you or against you. Well, now you can. The first ever advanced epigenetic saliva test that compares 20 million different data points of your DNA to help predict what is aging you faster or keeping you younger is being introduced to my audience at a 70% discount from the normal price. Go to seeds.md/epigenetic-test today to learn how to get your own digital twin that will help you take the steps to live longer and stay stronger. Don't wait, because this is a limited time offer not available anywhere else. Once these tests are gone, they're gone. Again, go to seeds.md/epigenetic-test today to learn more. Ever wish there was a precise way to gauge your recovery from workout to workout? Or wonder if the money you're spending on your nootropic supplements are actually improving brain function? Maybe you're aging and you're noticing some changes in memory. Wouldn't being able to really test your brain be of great value? Well, now you can with great accuracy with the Brain Gauge. The Brain Gauge lets you test essential components of brain health and track your brain health history, and all in the comfort of your own home. Go to gaugeyourbrain.com and use code SHR for $150 off this amazing device. That's gaugeyourbrain.com and SHR for $150 off. Hey, this is Carl. For 14 years, you've heard me talk about Can-C eye drops, and they being the reason that I do not need reading glasses at now 61 years old. But I regularly get emails and messages from people who've been using Can-C and having some amazing results. Recently, I got an email from a fellow named Chad, who, because he was on dexamethasone eye drops for over 6 months, developed a cataract. Can-C eye drops actually reduced my cataract to the point where even my doctor has a hard time finding it. I will never stop using Can-C eye drops twice a day. I've been using them since 2008, he says. And you should be too. There is no better way to keep your eyes healthy and seeing clearly than Can-C eye drops. Go to wisechoicemedicine.com today and get on board, and we will both be looking into the future with very clear vision. I love beef, and if you love beef, listen up. I've discovered the best tasting beef in the world, and that's not an exaggeration, at Piedmontese.com. The Piedmontese breed is famous from Italy for being lean and unbelievably tender, with half the fat and calories of traditional beef. Even typically tough cuts are tender when it comes from the Piedmontese cows. And for the first time ever, Piedmontese cows are being raised here in the USA. Get 2 free 10-ounce New York strips when you purchase $50 or more at Piedmontese.com with code SHR. Go to PIEDMONTESE.com and use code SHR today. You will never eat any other type of beef ever again.
7,451. That's how many people kick the bucket, buy the farm, or cash in their chips every day in the United States. Yep, that means 5 people are going to meet their maker during this commercial. And no, our commercials are not the cause. Half of those who punch the clock for the final time will do so without life insurance. Call Big Lou at Term Provider before you are number 7452. If you're a 50-year-old male, a tad porky with a touch of diabetes, $1 million of term life insurance may only cost about $200 a month. With more verified 5-star reviews than any other Lou on the radio, Big Lou has saved thousands of people thousands on their term insurance premiums. Stop procrastinating and call Big Lou today at 800-560-0301. 800-560-0301. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He doesn't want to be number 7,452. Call 800-560-0301 or biglou.com.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
Welcome back. My good friend Mark is here with us. He is a statistician. He dwells in the world of reality. He came on this show, I want to say a month ago, was it?
That's about right.
And he developed a model to predict the number of fatalities and the number of cases of COVID-19 in this country. And as I recall, I think your numbers are really coming to be true, right? I mean, you didn't overpredict. Do you remember what your prediction was?
Well, so far I've been slightly underpredicting, and I can't remember which number I quoted on your show last time I was on, because I've been updating it every week.
Right.
This last.
But so you're saying you are underquoting it, as opposed to everybody else. You were a bit more conservative with your prediction, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, compared to most of the models out there. Now, one thing that's happened is IHME model, which is the University of Washington model, that I think the administration's been relying on. Their estimates started pretty high. Came down dramatically, and then have slowly been going up. But because of that, I'm now estimating more deaths than they are. So we'll see.
We'll see.
I hope they're right, and I'm wrong.
Okay.
That's what I hope.
All right. Before we get into this discussion, I have to announce the name of the person who won the Be Strong blood flow restriction system, which is a $429 system. I own it. It's fantastic. It comes with upper leg band. Bladders, we'll say, or straps. These are bladders like a blood pressure cuff. These are not just some rinky-dink, strap that looks like something you hold your school books together with. Very sophisticated. They come with a hand pump that you can pump it up to the exact milligrams of mercury of pressure, so you can be precise and reproduce the pressure every time in every limb. It comes with 2 for legs, 2 for upper arms. There's an app for it, and there's a carry case for it, and then there's the bulb with the gauge on it that you blow them up. It's a fantastic product. A lot of people in the audience have bought them and love it. So the winner of the drawing is Donald Walton. He lives in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. His unit will be shipped out to him today. He'll get it probably in a few days. We had a lot of people sign up for this. There's a lot of interest in this. We have an unbelievable discount that will be emailed to everybody else. I can't say it on the air because I'll piss a lot of people off who paid full price for it. But if you entered to win the BFR band system and you are not a winner, you will still be a winner of sorts. But Donald Walton, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, he will be getting the $429 blood flow restriction system from Be Strong. So that's wonderful. Okay, so now I contacted you the other day and I said, Mark, I think I'm onto something. I said, if you look at the places that have the highest international travel, they were the earliest ones to be seeded. But the real big deal was those same cities that not only had international travel, but had a high dependency on mass transit is where the explosion, they became epicenters. What do you think?
Well, Carl, I think you're onto something, because after you asked me that question, I went and pulled some statistics together, and I looked at the correlation between the various factors that you had proposed and the extent of COVID deaths, actually. So, for example, between with mass transit, I found states that use a lot of mass transit, I found a correlation of 70%. That's not dramatic, but it's meaningful. Population density, 67% correlation. And on short notice, the best I could come up with as a proxy for international travel was the number of passports per capita for each of the states. And that showed a correlation of 70%. Now, sometimes you can put 2 or 3 of these factors together and improve your correlation. So I played around with that a little bit, but that didn't help in this particular.
Well, they're so close together. Then you're playing averages. But since they're all in the 65 to 70% range, one is not going to lift the other one up very much.
Right. Well, anyway, that's happened. Sometimes they will, but in this case, no, they didn't.
So, in considering this, and I know that you're a very conservative person because you work in the world of numbers, and numbers are all about absolutes. 2 and 2 is always 4. You don't massage it around and make it 6. So I'm asking you this without any type of political inference or ideological inference. Do you think that we could have, now that you've looked at this and you go, there is some correlation, there's some legitimacy, because don't forget, people from Kentucky could travel to Europe and they'd fly home to Louisville, but they'd fly to JFK in and out of the country and then fly to JFK and come home. So that's where the outliers come from. Well, how did this community and how did that community? But given what you looked at, do you think that it is a fair assessment to say, had we understood this, we could have just shut down New York, New Jersey, maybe Connecticut, because those are, New York and Connecticut, they're like bedroom states, maybe some parts of California. Could we have just created this quarantine effect just around the cities with the highest number of international travelers and the greatest dependency on mass transit, and save the rest of the country from being completely shut down? I mean, because North and South Dakota have 0 cases. Nobody's flying out of there to Europe, and they don't have any mass transit there, not in Montana either.
Well, and then there's something to your point. I would add Seattle, Washington to that list.
Yes, of course.
If we had done that early enough, and it would have meant a hard lockdown in those places, though, probably harder than anything we actually did. It would have been a very hard lockdown, and it would have had to been very early. That might have worked towards your point.
Right. So going forward, what politicians need to start to understand is the seeding and spread process of international travel and mass transit. And in the future, and there will be a future, because we've had this isn't the first time we've had a pandemic, let's be honest, right? But
correct.
In the future, maybe as soon as they see that process in New York, they say, no one can leave New York. Stay inside your state. That's great, but you can't go to New Jersey, you can't go to Connecticut. And then do the same thing with neighboring states where you start to see these cases erupt, and partition the country instead of shutting down the entire country. Wouldn't that be a sensible thing for politicians and lawmakers to start to consider in the future?
Well, in fact, Carl, if you study, there's a group of Asian countries. Now let's exclude China because we really don't know what's going on there. But
right.
But even there, I think China did some smart things eventually. But nonetheless, let's exclude China because, like I said, we just don't really know what's going on there. But you've got some countries like South Korea and some other small Asian countries that have been successful with this thing. And a big reason for that is, to some extent, they were doing exactly what you're proposing. Now, the other aspect of it, though, the one big reason that worked for them is they were looking out for that, they were alert for that, and they got after it early.
Right away.
Unfortunately, we didn't do any of that, and so by the time we started to take action, the
horse was out of the barn already.
Thank you.
Yeah,
yes.
Right.
Yep.
The horse was out of the barn.
The horse was out of the barn.
And I don't care why that happened, but we're just looking at statistics and facts right now. So that's great. So I'm not a complete idiot. I actually maybe saw some patterns here that are meaningful. Now, I also have to tell, for those of you who are tuning into an interview with my friend Mark for the first time, he's not just a brilliant statistician, but he's one strong dude. Mark, how old are you now?
I'm 64, Carl.
64. And you have been a competitive powerlifter for how long, Mark?
Since college, since age 19.
Okay. And you have deadlifted 4 times your body weight?
3 times. Thanks for building me up.
Well, almost 4, right?
Three
something. I mean,
I think my best ever as a percent of body weight was about 3.4.
That's pretty outstanding. So, and are you missing the gym, Mark?
To some extent, yes. I'm not going into details. I have some access to weights, but I am missing the gym.
I have all sorts of aches and pains that I did not have before this layoff. Now, keep in mind, I am training at home, but it's very limited. Like, I do my farmer's walks as a starting point. I bought an Airdyne AD6. Boy, that thing is harder than I ever thought it was going to be. I have kettlebells and dumbbells, and I have a bench. But it's just not the same as going in. Like, the thing I noticed the most is I hurt my right hip. For those of you who know what a real hip injury is, you feel it in your groin. You don't feel it out here by your gluteus minimus. When you hurt your hip, you feel it in your crotch. So I was doing some very heavy bent over T-bar rows with an Olympic bar and a pull down handle, the V pull down handle. And I got too wide on it one day. And I felt this grinding sensation in my groin. It was my hip. I went to the doctor. They did an x-ray. They said they really couldn't see anything. A CT scan would show more. I didn't want to subject myself to a CT scan. I just went on with my business. Well, I have constantly, whenever I train legs, I always do adduction and abduction work. And I do heavy adduction and abduction work because I think it's important to stabilize the upper legs. I don't want to fall getting out of the shower someday because one foot slides out. I want to have that strength to keep my feet together. Well, that bugger has been hurting me. And I know it's because the muscles that keep that joint from banging around, that keep it suspended nicely, are getting weaker and weaker. And I need to get to the gym soon because I am starting to feel this layoff. I really am. And it makes me sad. I hope I can correct some of these problems.
Yeah, my biggest issue right now is I've got a minor leg problem. If I could get it worked on a little bit, I think it'd be fine. But that's not going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately.
No, nobody's coming to your house to fix anything. Listen, Mark, thanks so much for coming on the air today to talk about this and for taking. I know you're a very busy guy and you took time to put into this and see if there was anything to it. And I appreciate this. And what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to excerpt this and I'm going to send it around to the media so they can see your discussion as well.
Okay, sounds great.
Thanks, Mark. And that's it for today. Don't forget, Donald Walton, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, is the winner. And those of you who entered, you will be getting a wonderful opportunity to take advantage of a consolation prize. And thank you to James Nestor. His book is called Breathe, the New Science of a Lost Art. And you can get it at Amazon.com. And that's it for today. We have a show tomorrow. You've been seeing a lot of Judy Mikovits in the media. She's going to be here tomorrow. She's going to be on this show tomorrow. And she's going to talk about the COVID-19 cover-up. And she's very well respected. And she's not a zealot. She's a very level-headed person. So if you really want to hear something, tomorrow is the time to tune in. That's it for today. Thank you for being here. And we'll see you soon. Share the show. Share the show. Always share the shows.